Thank you, Katie. I think we'll get started now. Welcome, everyone. My name is Caroline Broussard. I'm the chairperson of the North Region SELPA Community Advisory Committee, and we're so glad you all could join us this evening for a follow-up question and answer session following a presentation that the CAC hosted last year on post-secondary transition planning. Before I introduce our esteemed panelists, I would like to take care of a few housekeeping items. First, the chat is available and it is predominantly for asking questions of the panelists. It is also available as an accommodation for people with disabilities who require it as a form of communication. Please don't use it to comment on what you're hearing or to chat with others, as it will make it very difficult for us to filter for the questions that we want to bring forward during this Q&A session. It also takes attention away from the presenters. In addition to using the chat, you may also raise your hand to ask a question live. Please wait to be called on before asking your question. We will do our best to alternate between questions submitted in advance. Excuse me, please don't do that. We will do our best to alternate between questions submitted in advance, live questions, and questions from the chat. Please mute yourself if you're not asking a question to minimize background noise. This session is being recorded and will be posted on the CAC website. I hope that this doesn't preclude you from asking questions. As mentioned before, the chat is available for you to ask questions, and you may do so anonymously, and you can send those questions in the chat directly to me. Please see the norms posted on the screen. As mentioned, the chat is open to all. Our target audience is families and caregivers. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of IDEA, the SELPA, or member school districts. Anything said or written in the chat may be published, and please be reflective of the power associated with your role and how your communication may be received by others. And with that, it is the CAC's pleasure to welcome back our esteemed panelists from the post-secondary transition planning presentation that the CAC hosted on May 22nd, 2023. They, plus a few new panelists from the newly renamed Disability Works California, also known as the California Department of Rehabilitation, have all agreed to return specifically to answer your questions. I will begin introductions with Jan Johnston Tyler, founder and CEO of Evo Libre Consulting. Jan started Evo Libre after a successful run in high tech, seeing that neurodivergent kids like her own were graduating from high school, but floundering soon after in college, employment, and in life. Now in its 17th year, Evo Libre employs 25 people, including 5 neurodivergent employees, and provides a broad range of services to neurodivergent youth ages 14 through adult through private pay, school districts, county organizations, Department of Rehabilitation, and private contracts with organizations such as Salesforce, F5, and SAP. Welcome, Jan, and thank you for joining us again. Next, we have Audrey Vernick, Director of Patient and Family Advocacy, Pediatric Epilepsy Surgery Alliance. The Pediatric Epilepsy Surgery Alliance educates families on barriers to epilepsy surgery for patients with medically refractory epilepsy. It is committed to helping families understand the outcomes of their child's epilepsy surgery and support them on their lifelong trajectory through school, therapy, transition to adulthood, and beyond. Audrey's professional journey is deeply rooted in personal experience. Her first son, Bennett, faced significant health challenges from infancy due to prenatal stroke and eventually a hemispherectomy to control his seizures. Navigating her son's medical and educational complexities propelled her into advocacy work. In her current role, she helps epilepsy surgery patients and their families access essential medical, educational, vocational, transition, and community living services to optimize their quality of life. She is trained by the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates as a special education advocate. She's also a certified future planner via the ARC and a member of the Rare Epilepsy Network's Adulthood Transition Working Group, the Infantile Spasms Awareness Network, and the ILAE Social Work Section. Welcome, Audrey, and thank you for joining us again. Next, we have Michael Pereira, Executive Director of the Ala Costa Centers. Welcome, Mike, and thank you for joining us again. And last, but certainly not least, we have a team from Disability Works California, again, also known as the California Department of Rehabilitation. They are Della Randolph, Regional Director for the Greater East Bay District. Della's career with DOR spans 30 years and numerous roles that impact carrying out DOR's mission and vision. Gladys Mendelson, Senior Vocational Rehabilitation Counselor. As a tenured rehabilitation counselor, Gladys works with general consumer caseloads and supported employment caseloads. Gladys partners with Regional Center of the East Bay and a number of supported employment vendors. Gladys is based in the Oakland office. And Anna Lynn Tolentino, Student Services Coordinator. Anna serves all of the East Contract Costa County in her DOR role as Service Coordinator. Anna has been with the DOR since 2015, serving and creating opportunities for students and adults. Anna is based in the Antioch office. Welcome, Della, Gladys, and Anna Lynn, and thank you so much for joining me this evening. And before we get started, I just want to put in a plug for the CAC. If you enjoy this presentation this evening, please consider joining the CAC as a voting member. A membership application will be dropped in the chat at some point during this evening's presentation. So without further delay, we can begin this evening's session. Is everyone ready? Okay. Would anyone like to say anything before we jump into the first question? No pressure.
I just want to apologize for having such a long bio. I didn't know I was going to be the only one.
No need to apologize.
And I didn't know you were going to read them out loud. So anyway, sorry.
No need to apologize. Okay. So the first question we have, we'll begin with questions that were submitted in advance. And the first one is, my son is autistic, but not intellectually disabled. Is there a suitable college option for him? And I will just throw that out there to anyone who wants to respond to that question.
I will jump in quickly and say there are suitable colleges for pretty much everyone who doesn't have cognitive impact. It really depends on what the student wants to study. It also depends on what other challenges the student might have. There's a lot of opportunity, and a lot of people start with a 2-year program and then transfer to a 4-year program. There's also several opportunities here. The Cal State East Bay program's quite good for kids who might struggle a little bit more. There's Fresno. There's lots. Mike's got some ideas too.
Thanks, Jan. I just wanted to piggyback up what she said. I think the one thing to recognize for all families is that more and more college and universities are starting to cater with people with IDD and autism. There's a number of pilot projects that have come on over the last decade or so, and many UCs and Cal States, all of them actually possess some sort of disability support services, which is has to be initiated by students and their families who are interested in getting that kind of supports. To be clear, for those who are on this call, that is not necessarily like an IEP where you're entitled to X services, but making those needs known is helpful in helping to for those students to navigate the post-secondary academic environment. What Jan mentioned is true. Fresno, Cal State East Bay has a program that's emerging. The other one that I wanted to highlight, which has become kind of the poster child, forgive the term, for what's happening statewide, is the SEED program out of UC Davis. There was recent legislation that was passed last year, Dr. Arambula's bill, which basically allowed for investment in the post-secondary model, and they're using that as a model to kind of replicate across the UC and the Cal State system. Thanks.
So I'd like to chime in. I have personal lived experience in the past couple years navigating this process, and my son has a fairly complex medical history, but he also has an autism diagnosis. Just a couple of thoughts when I saw this question come through email earlier. One is there is a movement to include more students with disabilities in college programs. And so I agree that you could probably find a college program that your child can get into. And there are some academic supports through the Disability Student Services Office, but the student has to be willing to advocate over and over and over and over and over again for every single test and every single project. It's not like a blanket accommodation. So that's a challenge in itself. So that's something to think about when you're looking at your high school transition related goals. That's going to be super important. But while these universities have some supports in those accommodations, they're really not in general addressing kind of the psychosocial needs of these adults. And where I see kids falling apart, including my own son, is that there are those supports do not exist. So CSU East Bay has a little teeny tiny program of 10 students for kids with autism. They only accept you as a freshman and they have 30,000 students in the school. It's a research study. It is not a program. And the SEED program is only open to students who have intellectual disability. So my son did not qualify for that. Other programs exist, but they're non-degree, right? So you see where I'm going. And yes, you can start in a 2-year program, but if that 2-year program isn't skilled at working with students with disabilities or you don't have the right supports, it can be really challenging. So I don't mean to be discouraging. I want to just put a little realistic point on this, that oftentimes I feel like, and this is where I heard a lot from different agencies, there's so many options, there's so many programs, you can do anything you want. But I think it's important as parents that you know what your child is going to need to learn how to do in order to function in those settings, because it's not high school and the supports aren't there, and it's very much on the student once they get there.
And I want to piggyback again on what Audrey said. It's absolutely true. And I think a lot of parents don't understand that there's a huge cliff between an IEP and the type of services that high school kids will get through an IEP and what is available in post-secondary and later in the workforce. So it's the difference between an IEP and frankly, just plain old ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's a huge cliff. And one of the things that we constantly are challenging both families and school districts, that if a kid is supposedly going to go to college, they have to get the kid college ready. And what that means is the self-advocacy piece that Audrey was talking about, that the kid is able to articulate the needed skills or the needed accommodations, that they are at or about grade level academically across the board, because there's very few remediation classes now in the community college and at the Cal State and UC level. So it's really important for parents to understand you're not going to get push-in services. You're not going to get modified homework. You're not going to get anything that looks like that. It is college, and the kid has to be able to do college level work, except in the, as Audrey said, in the non-credentialed schools.
Great, thank you so much. Anyone else want to chime in before I move on to the next question? Okay.
Oh, Gladys, did you want to say something? I see your hand up, but you're muted.
Yeah, no, I can't, for some reason, I can't raise my electronic hand.
Okay.
Good evening. I want to thank you all for having us here today. My name's Gladys Mendelson. I'm out of the Oakland DOR. And as they said, I'm a tenured QRP, which means a qualified rehabilitation professional. And what that means is I've just been around the block a whole bunch of times. I'm listening to my esteemed colleague Jan, and I hear what everybody's saying, but I work with a program that I know it's not the be-all answer to everything. But here in the Greater East Bay, we found some great success with our students at the College of Alameda College to Career program. I was a bit appalled when I heard Audrey say that you have to advocate over and over and over again for like test accommodations, which I think is absolutely outrageous. It should be that you apply for the accommodations and they're either approved or not approved, which usually they're approved, and then it's just getting them into place. I'm not certain what school districts are causing you to go through so much grief, because I just think that that's awful. It shouldn't be that difficult of a process. In fact, one of the things I often say to people when they come to the DOR is that you don't have to fight me. If you need a service in order to be successful, I'm going to be provide it for you. Because I'm not. There's not. It doesn't make any sense not to. It really, one of the reasons I think the C2C program, it doesn't lead to a degree. This is correct. But what it does do is it does introduce people to college. It provides educational coaches. And what we can do is we get somebody started on their degree program. And we've had some great success over the last couple of years of having clients transfer, either complete their AA degree or transfer to a 4-year university.
And Gladys, just quickly, CAC is wonderful. There's no doubt about it. But in virtually every community and four-year college I've had experience with, kids have to ask for accommodations every test, every quiz.
Oh, wow.
It's horrible. It's bad. And
That's-
it's because the disability resource centers aren't funded well and the people aren't trained. And because the instructors couldn't be bothered. It's sad but true. So it depends. Your mileage may vary.
Right. No, I get it. And I'm not trying to be a know-it-all here at all. I'm just saying that there are some alternatives out there but we need to keep working on developing more. This is what I've seen in my work is that there are some programs in other states that are usually private universities, quite expensive, $15,000 a semester, and it doesn't really do anything special for the student. But here in the state of California, we are lucky. The state of California, combined with the Tarzan Center to put together the C2C programs. And I'm surprised that you're not even talking about your program.
I'll wait for a little bit. We've got Cheryl and Mike who want to speak up, but yes, it's a little bit different, but yes.
Thank you.
Hi, Cheryl. Please feel free to chime in.
Hey, everybody. So I work at the Disability Rights Education Defense Fund in the Parent Training and Information Center. And I just want to say, as someone who also teaches from time to time at the university level, that it's absolutely true that while the Disabled Students Program will approve accommodations, the number one skill that students are required to have is the ability, and they will tell you this, is the ability to advocate for themselves, which is often exactly the nature of the disability. So for example, if there's a test coming up, the student needs to give the professor a week's notice that they'll be needing to take it in an alternate spot, that sort of thing. So there's a real disconnect between the people who are providing disability services and the educators who are often not very educated about disability, who make them jump through hurdles. So that said, all I wanted to say is I think this is a place where at the high school level, or the transition level, we can do better, which is doing things to prep students like writing a letter of introduction to a professor, having a portfolio of things, accommodations that the student knows works, how to fill out a resume, that sort of thing, because those are the things that, in my experience, really shut our kids down. Thanks.
Well, I'll jump in. So thank Caroline, to introduce me. I feel like I'm going to make a comment that kind of encapsulates what Gladys had mentioned, what Jan had rightly noted, and what Cheryl just raised. I think there are certainly pockets of programs like the CAC in Alameda. I mean, we're fortunate at Alacosta to have folks that enter in and exit out of that program. But to what Audrey had said earlier, ultimately it comes down to the person and their circle of support, or people who are helping to advocate for those folks, to share what the needs and the abilities are of somebody with a disability in different educational environments. That is fact. And quite frankly, that's true of any person who's entering into the realm of higher education. And I'm not suggesting that's good or bad. I'm just saying that's the way it is, right? As Jan rightly pointed, there is no IEP. There's no some sort of like overarching thing that allows for someone to do, which is why when I think about what Cheryl just shared, the path to self-advocacy happens at birth. It happens with people understanding that they have the right to express themselves and, quite frankly, to have educational and therapeutic environments that allow for that kind of self-advocacy to happen. And self-advocacy isn't necessarily just based upon somebody's ability to say that I need X. It's about being able to say that this is who I am and this is what I want to do with my day, with what's happening in my current educational environment. And that's something that I know that my organization tries to proffer in our after school programs, because that's an opportunity for folks to kind of break out of that compliance-based shelter that exists for people with disabilities. And, you know, asking permission is different than asking for the respect to do what you need to do. And those types of skills need to be cultivated at a much earlier stage so that when they get to an academic post-secondary situation, they can be like, no, I need X. And I understand that there's a timeline associated with this exam that's upcoming or this paper that I'm due, because I have the expectations of another student that's in this cohort of people being taught. So I kind of wanted to like flip the script a little bit because of what Gladys talked about at CAC and some programs that are really making that emerge. But this, I believe, is something that needs to be kind of cultivated amongst our community in order to create positive outcomes for folks that are person-centered and at the direction of what they want. Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question, which is, what do parents need to know about moving from one classroom teacher who teaches multiple subjects to multiple teachers on the IEP team?
I'll jump in here. I think so when you get to high school and you're moving class to class, oftentimes not all of the teachers are reading the IEP. It's just a fact. So as a parent, one thing you could do is with your child, because again, you're teaching self-advocacy skills, have them create a one-pager with you. And you're saying, what do I need this teacher to know about me? Right. And that way you're kind of killing two birds with one stone. So you're maybe not everything about the child's disability. They don't want to tell everything, but they need to tell the math teacher, I can't see when you're standing on my left, or they need to tell the band teacher, when it gets to this volume, I'm going to need to leave the room because it's too loud for me, or whatever it is, right? And that the student could, if they're capable, go to each teacher. I think that's the most effective way, and say, I wanted to share this with you. I have an IEP. I don't know if you've read it, but here it is. Because sometimes when it's coming from mom, it can be taken a little bit differently. So, but I would not expect every teacher to read the IEP, unfortunately. My understanding of Ed Code is that only one gen ed teacher needs to be in an IEP meeting. So it could be the band teacher or the gym teacher, and they've met the requirement. So they're not having every single subject specific teacher in that IEP meeting, and they may not have read the IEP. The other thing is to just be really clear about what the supports are and who's providing them. And if that's not really clearly delineated in your IEP, then you have nothing to go on. So if the eighth grade team said, we're going to do X in high school, you better make sure you've talked to the team about that in high school and that it's clearly specified in the IEP. The math teacher will spend 15 minutes every morning going over the math problems with X student in what setting, how long, et cetera, because otherwise these things they just are not going to happen. Things fall apart pretty quickly. So
I would add also that you make sure that every goal is actually being tracked quarterly, or every trimester as they're supposed to be. We see a lot of IEPs at the end of the year, the beginning of the year, where the teachers haven't put in any input. And so they're just guessing at the end of the year that the kid has made progress or has made no progress. And it's really, really disheartening to see that. Also, you can request certain teachers to attend an IEP. So for example, if the kid's struggling with English, you can request to have the English teacher there. Whether or not they come is a different story, but you can at least get some feedback from them. But and also to piggyback quickly on what Audrey had said, I see a lot of IEPs where a goal has, this very convoluted mathematical equation about what the kid's supposed to do. And then the resources assigned are student and parents, or student, parent, teacher. But then later on in the IEP, there's no definition of what is actually going to happen, who's going to do it, to Audrey's point, how frequently, what the cadence is, et cetera. So really plan, especially in high school, to drill down into your IEP to make sure that everything is actually being tracked and is doable.
I just want to throw in, sorry, whenever it says that the student or the parent is responsible for an IEP goal, please change it, because the IEP is what the school is doing for the child. The student and the parent are responsible for everything else, right? So the IEP is a document that tells what the school district is doing for the child. So if they're saying, so-and-so will walk to class on time without prompts, 5 days a week, and it's to be the person responsible is the student, that's not an IEP goal. It's a statement of, a dream, but it's not a goal. There's no one implementing it. Really be careful about that.
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, thank you. So kind of aligned. First I want to kind of echo what Audrey and Jan were saying about the importance of the IEP and role definition. But I wanted to flip the script a little bit, because parents who are kind of going through that process, again, this is a generic statement or question based upon us not knowing what the support needs or the abilities of the student who's kind of going through that. And one of the areas that I think that are super critical for any young person to go through that kind of transition to be successful, especially those that we serve, or those that we interact with, are fundamental. What's the student level of independence to navigating their physical learning community? What are the routines and route familiarity, the relationship with support persons and personnel that exist in order for those accommodations and supports that have been recommended by the classroom teachers? Whether they've read the IEP or not is irrelevant. It's about what those supports are there in order for them to be thriving. Whether the teacher or subject matter experts regarding a particular subject are able to modify said curriculum to meet the needs of the learning styles of the students that are involved, right? I mean, the social structure and the context in which people cultivate a learning environment is really important. How that person communicates, and just as importantly, how does the teacher choose to communicate with their parents and families? Some are better on the phone, some require email, or some are good in the Blackboard environment that now it's been more pervasive post-pandemic. How are you as a family and as your child's ability to advocate for themselves being able to enhanced by all of these different options that are available for folks to hopefully create a more idyllic learning environment for those being served. Well, I think the IEP is important, and I definitely think that is the end all be all in terms of how things are divided, who's responsible, accountable for whatnot. Ultimately, the learning situation of when a person is being served is really critical to their success. And those are the types of things that are going to be enormous barriers for any person that's moving from, say, a middle school, junior high school environment into a high school kind of climate. And being kind of cognizant of those things and what would be able to benefit your student would be super helpful, because as Audrey rightly noted, there's going to be a handful of goals, quote unquote, that may not be quote unquote academically inclined, but may be very important for that person's social emotional experience in their learning environment.
Thank you so much. Aaron, if you don't mind, I'm assuming you have a question. I'm gonna take one from the chat real quick, and then I'm gonna come back to you. So the question posed in the chat is, my son is severely disabled physically and intellectually. College and employment are out of the question. I hope him to continue on PT, OT, and AAC training after high school. Are there ways for these services to be funded? He is currently getting all of these services from the school district. And I know the panelists have been fantastic in engaging this question in the chat, but I wanted to bring it forward so that everyone can hear the answers and also for the recording. Thank you so much.
Is it okay if I answer?
Yes.
Okay, great. So a lot of the work that I do is working with very, very, very complex students like my own son, because a lot of the people I work with have had parts of their brain removed and they end up with multiple impairments. So first of all, there are college classes that anyone can take. So if you can have an intellectual disability, I know City College of San Francisco has classes that you can survey. Sometimes day programs have attendance at some of these community college classes. So if that is something that was an interest of your son's, it's not completely ruled out, right? So he may not be earning a degree, but there are ways to access that content. In terms of services, if he's not earning a diploma by age 18, the services should be provided under the IEP. Sometimes it's hard at transition time because the transition programs can be set, like this is what we do in our transition program. And if you're saying he needs AAC training and support, that can be a little bit of a challenge. So I would definitely make sure you're prepared to advocate for whatever it is that he needs in his transition years. And then as Jan mentioned, and I can let her chime in more, once he's 22, the regional center is they're solely responsible, or once you earn the diploma. So sometimes 18 to 22, if they've earned a diploma, you can start to access some things, but not everything. And I'm just going through this self-determination planning with my son right now, and it's phenomenal what we're going to be able to access, things I wish I'd known about sooner. So I know that it can be onerous to start to go through that, but I think for your child who's so complex, I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you do a deep dive and learn more as much as you can about the self-determination program, because then you can get funding for all of his needs. You have to find your own providers, but that's sometimes better than relying on state agencies or local agencies to find service providers. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, to just chime in here, our experiences with clients is that frequently, if not always, the providers that you find on your own are better than the providers that the regional center can procure. And it's simply a matter of money. I know that sounds kind of brutal, but we're not regional center vendors. We never will be, because I would go out of business. I can't afford to be a regional center vendor, but we do take clients under self-determination because we can get paid our full rate. And so we can provide those services that way, but there's no way. I mean, there was a period of time when San Andreas, as I recall, was actually underpaying per San Jose's minimum wage, because they couldn't afford to pay the same that the city minimum wage called for. So it's a state issue, sadly, but you're oftentimes better just to find your own people who are really good. You might get less services in terms of the hours, but the quality typically will go up.
I guess I wanted to chime in there. Respectfully, I disagree with Jan. I'm a service provider who serves adults. Certainly, I agree with her perspective that we're underpaid from the state's perspective. There's no question about that. I mean, that is sort of what I do every day in terms of advocating at a state level. I'm in Sacramento right now doing legislative advocacy to increase or have the state really recognize the power of the Lanterman Act. What I will say is that self-determination, like Audrey's entered into, is a really effective program for folks to be able to access a wider array of service deliverers. That is 100% true, because the that program in particular, and I see actually a family that I serve put in the chat, like, how do we find out about self-determination programs? Well, self-determination is not a program, it's a way for people to fund their services. That is underneath the DDS model. Now, I don't want to dive into the wonkiness of it, but for a new person that's entering into the system, it's very different than somebody who's already established a manner of support for within their system. The thing that I want families to really be aware of is once you exit special education, going into adult services, because this is a question that was in the chat earlier, guarantees you nothing. If you had gone from a place that gave you speech and language and OT and PT and all this other range of services to benefit your child, the likelihood that that directly gets translated into what the services are rendered for you when you turn 23, or for those who are entering in as a diploma candidate at 19, are zero. Want to be clear, you will not get any of that. What you will get is an opportunity to discuss the things that you need with your regional center. And this is a transition meeting. So, the discussion around transition should be focused on getting regional center representation in your IEPs so that your case manager, if you're fortunate enough to have a consistent one, can be able to kind of identify the needs and the supports that are beneficial to this person as they enter into adult services. So, I think self-determination, I think, has been really remarkable. I certainly have a number of participants that are in our program that use that service. But establishing need is really challenging for somebody who's entering the system versus someone who's already been a recipient of services. And I'm not trying to say that to dissuade somebody from entering into that as a self-determination person. I'm just saying that that is a very different dynamic, because again, what is educationally appropriate and what is required by law to be mandated by an IEP and all of the federal guidelines that dictate that does not exist in the adult world, the adult space. It just doesn't. So it's really important that families that are listening to this call is, your primary focus of advocacy from 16, I would argue 14 years old, from 14 years old until they exit the special education system, is to really acquaint your other providers that are going to be in the circle. And then if you decide to go to self-determination, that's great. Certainly Jan's point's well taken. You can find a wide swath of folks. She and her organization decided not to accept regional center funding because it's outside their bailiwick financially. That's fine. But again, like organizations like mine that offer a wide array of adult services are bound by whatever the vendorization we have. And that's just based upon the amount of money, that, not to put too fine a point on it, but the amount of money that person benefits from, not what's best for them. That's a different thing than what happens in adult service. It's about benefit versus what's best. And in the educational sphere and in a school district, you have a lot more ability to influence that as a family member than you do when you go to adult services. And again, that is just fact. And I'm sure my DOR or Disability Works colleagues, now as they've rebranded, can talk about that a little bit too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Erin, please feel free to ask your question.
Okay, my question circles back to the IEP and the meetings themselves. And is there some kind of service that's offered for giving families like an advocate with them at the meeting? I often feel like I maybe don't even realize that I'm missing red flags in the IEP meeting. Like, my son has a visual impairment. We're constantly talking about accommodations, and I'm constantly saying we need to test all those accommodations out in order for him to understand what is going to work for him. We can't just throw him into a test with an accommodation and hope that it works for him. But I never see those things happening. Like, I don't see them testing those things out with him ever. It seems like it just kind of gets glossed over. So is there someone else we could bring into the IEP meeting to help direct those,
Yeah.
like, yeah.
There certainly are. You can hire advocates, you can hire an attorney, but you can also go to Parents Helping Parents to their website. And they have a huge directory. And I believe that there are some advocates who will do this pro bono for you to read through an IEP to help you understand some of the potential gotchas so that you can at least be better informed when you go into an IEP meeting. I mean, that's really, really an important thing, I think, because school districts aren't going to tell you what you don't know, and they're not going to give you, frankly, much warning for the things that they may be glossing over, like we see here with an 11th grader who really hasn't had much transition support and is going to be graduating soon, right? So it's really, as far as I'm concerned, the more parents you talk to, the more consultants you talk to, you're just going to learn more, and you become a lot wiser and a little bit more savvy about what can and cannot be done.
Thank you so much, Jan. I'm going to jump to Annalyn because I don't think we've heard from her yet. Hi, Annalyn.
Hi. Okay, kind of lost my voice already, but thanks for everyone and thanks for all the helpful information. But I just wanted to add that DOR has been we always get invited for IEP meetings. And I have been to IEP meetings where there's a lot of there's advocates. I wouldn't really describe them, but they are very, very well, I wanted to say that they are there for the parent, and I really, really understand, that they can be really very demanding, and they could be really sometimes they not to say any more negative, but I just want to say sometimes they will just really just overtake all the entire IEP meeting. But we truly understand, because they're there for the parents and to advocate for the students. So yeah, there are advocates that are available, and just want to let you guys know that DOR is available, and we always get invited to IEP meetings. And I could see Jan nodding her head because we get invited and we explain to them about student services and about what DOR and what we can offer after high school if they don't want to avail of student services. I assume that everyone knows about student services, but if not, we offer the pre-employment services. And so like me, I'm Anna. I have been going to I am in Antioch. You guys didn't hear about my introduction. So we've been going to different high schools here in the Eastern Contra Costa County. So we've been providing workshops. And aside from that, there's a big focus. We've been focusing a lot of work experience. We have work experience for like high school students who are working inside the campus, for Liberty School District, for Antioch School District, and Pittsburgh School District. And also we have businesses that we have already reached out, and we have students working there, and we have a lot of students working in DOR offices. So sorry, I think I already if you guys have any more questions later on, I could talk more about work experience.
Thank you so much, Annalyn.
Thank
Audrey,
you.
did you want to add on?
I think I've kind of forgotten what the original question was. Can you? So I'm sorry. I'll wait until the next one comes around.
No problem. I'm going to pull another question from the form that was submitted in advance. And this one is actually for you, Audrey. It's a follow-up question to your presentation from 2023 on slide 9. The question is, my child has a special healthcare need. I would like to know more about the 10th grade level literacy, math, computing skills needed for such individuals to manage their own medications, diet, and nutritional requirements, reading medical information. Do caregivers write this into secondary education IEP plans as a goal? What if my kid is not eligible for an IEP but has a 504 plan? How do I work with the high school to help my child meet this goal?
So I think while this sounds very specific, I think this actually would apply to almost everyone. Whatever your child will be doing after high school is what the IEP should be about. And if you don't know, just take your best guess. So someone commented in the chat, about a different profile of a child, right? Doesn't matter what your child's profile is. What will your child be doing after the last day of high school or the last day of their transition program? Will they be working? Will they be volunteering? I've had teams say so-and-so is going to be working as a janitor at X and such place, but he's not earning a high school diploma. So how are you going to do that when you can't get that job if you don't have a high school diploma, right? So what it is if your child has special healthcare needs and needs a certain level of literacy, and you can look up healthcare literacy to find out that 10th grade level. Most healthcare materials are written at a 10th grade level or higher. That's websites, pamphlets, medications. And this is true for any student, regardless if they have a special healthcare need or not. When you get to college and you get the flu, what medication do you take? Or you fall and, sprain your ankle, when do you call 911 and when do you go to the emergency room? These are all things that you're going to have to navigate. So what you're doing is you're painting a picture with the IEP team about what this child is going to be doing as an adult. And then those are they're called measurable post-secondary goals. They're in education, employment, and independent living. And then every IEP goal that you write supports those measurable post-secondary goals. So if your child's measurable post-secondary goal is to live independently, but he's got a complex medical condition that's going to require him to understand medical literature at a 10th grade level, that's a conversation you need to have as a team. Maybe the school nurse is working with the student to understand their diabetes medication or how to advocate, for access to epilepsy medication throughout the day in a job site or whatever it is that they might need. You kind of have to imagine scenarios and start building skills that will prepare the student to be ready to to do those things once they're in adulthood. And in terms of, do caregivers write this into the secondary education IEP plans as a goal? So parents are part of the IEP team. You absolutely 100% can propose a goal to the IEP team. You can say, I think this would be a good goal, and explain why. Find some collaborators on the team that are going to help you write the goal, perhaps. And if they say, no, we're not working on that, ask them to provide prior written notice as to why they're refusing to address an identified area need for your child that's related to their post-secondary goals. So you just have to be, I always say, polite but firm, right? Your child needs X, and you have to now backwards chain. What are all the steps they're going to need to be able to do that without mom or dad? And then you asked about an IEP versus a 504 plan. So the 504 plan does not have the protections of an IEP. There are no goals in a 504 plan. So a 504 plan is closer to what you'll see in college, where they're just accommodations that are provided for the student. There are some cases where you can have a 504 plan and maybe receive a related service. And in that case, there would be a goal for that specific related services, but there are rarely like general overarching IEP goals. There's no transition plan as part of the 504. So if you feel your child needs an IEP to address those transition related goals during high school, then ask for that evaluation. And they have to do that in a timely manner. If you put it in writing, it needs to be within 60 days, blah, blah, blah. So absolutely, it's about looking at your child, put your future goggles on, and then you're just, it's like, I want to go to Disneyland next May. What am I going to do? And I backwards chain. Well, I need to get a dog sitter, and I need to, make sure the car is working, and I need to get the tickets, and I want the fast pass and whatever it is, but I don't show up at Disneyland with no planning. So it's the exact same thing. You have to think about, what are they going to be doing? And if you really have no idea, start exploring. Take your child into settings where you think they're going to be wanting to be as an adult, regardless of their level of ability. I worked with a child who was nonverbal, severely intellectually disabled, and he absolutely loved the zoo and dogs. And so we've started creating transition activities for him around the zoo and dogs. And he's now working on a supported internship at the zoo where he feeds animals and he works on some of the exhibits. So it's just it doesn't matter about the ability. It's what are their interests. And the law really states over and over and over again, if you go ahead and read IDEA, read all the sections on transition, they say it has to be based on the student's stated strengths, preferences, and interests. So if you're not asking the student and getting them involved, or if the child's not verbal, the parent will often know my kid loves dogs in the zoo, that's what it should be driving it as well. I hope that's helpful. Sorry, there's so many things to talk about with transition. It's hard to parse it out into little pieces.
You did an amazing job, Audrey. Thank you so much. Jan, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, so to piggyback on this, my experience has been that most kids who struggle after high school graduation, whether it's 18 or 22, it's because they don't have the independent living skills. They don't know how to do things like make change, or they don't know, nobody bothered to tell them, frankly, to sign up for Department of Rehab. I mean, and remember, we work throughout the state of California, not just the East Bay. So we see a lot of failure in that area. We actually, to get back to what Gladys was mentioning earlier, we have developed a 2-week boot camp that we've been running now for 8 years. And recently, in the last 2 years, we've gotten DOR to fund it for DOR clients, consumers. And basically, it's 2 solid weeks of independent living skills. All the things that you would want your high schooler to know at age 18 before they walk out the door, right? So it's basic finances, it's cooking, it's shopping, it's mobility, it's all of that stuff kind of lumped into one. For a lot of the kids that we work with, they don't get those services because we work with neurodivergent kids with little or no cognitive impact. So their IEPs are more around behavior or academic goals, but not around independent living skills. However, they're missing all of that. And so that's really, really critical to make sure that your school district is providing that. And as Audrey said, read IDEA, read what it says. It's supposed to be not just academics, not kids just graduating high school with enough units or credits. They have to be able to go on to whatever comes next. And if they're ill prepared, it's a failure of the school district, not of your kid.
Thank you so much, Jan. Okay. Our next question from the previously submitted questions is, I have a high school junior that would like to go to a 4-year college. The high school transition activities are the same activities that are available to any college-interested student. My son has ADHD and sensory issues and continues to struggle with social interactions, hygiene, and time management. I would like his IEP to have transitional goals in these areas, but the team has said that those types of goals are only for students who are on certificate track and will be in school until they're 22. Is this accurate? And if not, what information can I share with them to inform them of their obligation?
How long do you have? Sorry. So that's not accurate at all. Again, some of the admin, I would hazard a guess, need to be reading IDEA themselves. I mean, it's really clear. If you read the text of the law, it really is quite clear what they need to be doing. So a couple of things. We also have a program, and the Life Launch program that I just discussed is actually bundled in this other program. It is a light wrap for kids just like yours who have milder, if you will, challenges. And we follow the kids virtually through Zoom through the first 2 years of their college, provided they are in state. That's really the only thing. So it's called College Launch. It's a program that we've been running. We're going into our 3rd year now. Again, we worked with Della and Gladys to build this program, and now it's throughout the state of California. Doesn't matter what college the kid's going to. They could be going to a 2-year or 4-year. I don't care if they're at Foothill or Stanford. But it is a program that is designed to help these kids with the self-advocacy, with the executive functioning, with the social interaction, with all the things that kids like them are missing. And again, Department of Rehab pays for this. So it's really a nice program. There are, depending on the school, some schools have better disability resource centers, as we spoke of earlier, that might be able to help with some of the social, some of the other things. But really, it's about, you know, shepherding your kid through the first 2 or 4 years of college. Because remember, you know, college is one thing. Getting them through college is great, just like getting them through high school is great. But if the end result is you want this kid to be employment ready, the rules change again. And so, you know, somebody who's been shepherded or who's had too much contact and not really learned how to take care of themselves, they're not going to do well in employment down the road. So it's, you know, constant shifting, constant learning for the kid. It's not over at high school.
Hi, Della, did you want to chime in?
I did, yes. And Jan, thank you, and thank my team, Gladys and Anna, for bringing up the variety of ways that DOR works to serve the individual. You know, I'm just listening and I'm looking at some of the postings here, and I want to go back to like a conceptual framework for us, and it is about a person-centered need. And so all of these norms that are set, I know why norms exist because we need a norm. But I think when you're sitting at a desk and you're talking to someone about their individual struggles, their individual triumphs, strengths, you got to look at it from those perspectives. I was reading and just struck by Kathleen's comment about when she was suggesting something in the IPE goal for her son, that she was wondering if they should have accepted it. I say that's where your strong advocacy and having your son speak up. If you wanted it, he wanted it, and vocational goals and vocational opportunities can be met through that, I say, yeah, I think you should push a little harder to make it happen, because it just isn't about what the print says, oh, it precludes this, or it's interpretive a lot of times. So I think self-advocacy is not just for us as we teach in a lot of our classes for our youth, it's for the parents too, to know, you push that envelope a little bit more. I think you know best your son or daughter's need to have interview skills training ad nauseum. I mean, how many of us would be ready to go and interview, you know, with the president of a huge company, no matter how much skill set that we have? We'd be a little bit intimidated and we might need a little more brushing up. So think about a kid who really hasn't had a lot of work experience. So that was just my plug for reminding everyone, this is what DOR needs to live in: individualistic, person-centered approach to each person, and not just a can always that has to be filled, a box rather. So that's just my comment as parent and longtime provider of services for people with disabilities.
Thank you so much, Della. Audrey.
So such an important point, Della, and I think it's in the literature that students who have a job during high school have the best post-secondary outcomes, regarding disability or not. And it's a great way to start to figure out what do your kids' post-secondary goals look like, and what should their annual goals be. If they're working at Starbucks and they have an auditory processing disorder, or they think they're going to work at Starbucks, right? And they go in there and 5 minutes in, they're like, whoa, I can't tolerate this, or they have other sort of sensory issue or anything. Start to have the student be in different work environments. They don't have to have a job. You can take the kid to work day, to every possible job site you can think of, and start really thinking about it. And it does a lot of the onus is on the parents to support this during high school. I mean, really throughout life. I think Mike said it best. I think you talked about how transition is self-advocacy is a lifelong thing. It starts at birth, right? We're transitioning throughout our whole lives. But in order to, in response to the question that was originally asked about the school district says we don't have to do that. So the IEP is an individualized plan. I think, Jan touched on some of this. My son has a multiple disabilities, physical, auditory processing, vision. He's kind of got it all because he's half a brain, right? So he's got half of everything, but he also had the intellectual ability to attend college, but he also has a severe executive function disorder and memory issues and social issues, right? So it was, it's this very uneven profile. And I had the same response in high school when I said, well, it's great that we're working on a diploma track and he's getting supports there, but he also needs a lot of functional supports. And they said the exact same thing to me. We don't do that here. And so I read the IDEA, and guess where in the IDEA it says we don't do that here? It doesn't say that. And nowhere in the IDEA does it say that if a student is on one track, they don't get to get on another track. There's no tracks in the IDEA. The services are supposed to be based on the student's identified needs and strengths and their stated preferences. That's what the law says at transition age. That's the transition related services, et cetera. And I know there's a lot of adult agencies here, and as much as possible, bring in DOR, bring in the outside agencies so you can start to, the more you do that in conjunction with their high school experience, I think the better, because you have a little support where you get to start a new service like DOR, and then you jump right, instead of just jumping right in after. But there's nowhere, the IEP is supposed to be individualized. If the student has that area of need, there should be goals in that area. And if they refuse, again, ask them to give you prior written notice saying why they refuse to provide goals in an area of need that your child has that impacts their stated post-secondary goals, because there's no tracks. There's no, if you're getting a diploma, you don't get functional skills support. That's completely ridiculous, in my opinion, and for what I read in the law.
Thank you, Audrey. Mike?
Yeah, so want to underscore and underline what Audrey said. I mean, she's absolutely right. And by the letter of the law, you have the ability to advocate for a diverse area of needs for your student, for your loved one. The only caveat that I'll give to that, and this is an important one, is something that falls outside the auspices of what an educational environment can give. In the example, the question that the person gave for us to kind of spur this conversation, one was hygiene related. I'm not saying that hygiene can't be supported in a school setting. Of course it can. I've worked in non-public schools. I've run non-public schools that did that. But those are certain aspects of things that may require a family to look at services outside of the realm that a school district offers. And that's why I'm putting that as a caveat. While Audrey's absolutely right, you should be able to advocate for functional skills that fall underneath the kind of rubric or framework of what would be, academically valuable, so to speak, for a person. There are going to be some areas that are going to be a little outside the bailiwick of what an educational environment would be able to provide consistently, because they're seeing a student for, say, 6 hours of a day versus the other 18 hours that somebody's getting different types of supports. And I'm sure, I can't speak for Audrey and her son, but I'm sure that many people on this call have a variety of different support systems that are involved with your child's life. It's sort of the fabric of the way special education and special services are kind of jigsawed together for a certain case in point. But this is where in the IEP process, you have the ability to say, we're working on this in this type of setting. This is something we'd like to see generalized in a school setting for the reasons that were pointed out in many of the questions we have, which is, can somebody have these social interaction skills? Can they have these hygiene-based skills, time management-based skills that can translate to them being successful in a workplace or successful in a collegial setting? So I guess what I want to make sure that families on this call understand, not just about transition planning, but about the whole of your educational experience for the people that you love, is that school districts are going to govern, rightfully so, based on IDEA and based on the IEP process, what governs their school setting. That's only a certain percentage of the day. And so there are going to be other supports that may be very helpful for you as a family that can certainly facilitate and augment what happens educationally as well. And they should be working in concert with one another, is all that I'm wanting to underscore.
Thank you, Mike. Jan, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I respectfully disagree with that. The understanding I have of the law, it is successful throughout the school day. And many, many, many school districts and families have shown at, at the OAH level that the school day is the entire day, from the time the kid wakes up to the time the kid goes to bed. right? Because the school day doesn't just happen at the school district. So, I mean, I hear you and I agree, but people get mental health services, they get transportation, right? So there's a lot, I mean, you're right, you know, we have to be careful about assuming that school districts are going to do it all, because they can't. But I also want to be careful that parents do understand that it's not just academics. And I think you were getting to that, Mike, but it may not have been clear. So it's not just the academics, it's not just executive functioning. It really is the services, the interventions that kids need to be successful post-secondary, right?
So I want to respond to that. I want to respond to that, Jan, because I appreciate the distance there, and professional distance is good. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't saying that school districts aren't responsible for all of the different aspects of a person's life or their student's life. What I was saying is that the school district alone is not going to be responsible for all of that. And the reason why I mentioned that is because it falls under the umbrella of what you just successfully said, successful throughout the school day, from the time they wake till the time they go to sleep, whatnot. That's the way that our current educational system and the way that special education is proffered through that. But we all know that there are other supports that exist within the sphere of influence for the people, for all of the students that are receiving services, especially those with high support needs. And all I'm trying to kind of assert is that that collaborative kind of process is critical for what that could be. Because again, somebody could be getting, you know, ABA at home, which I used to be. I'm a behavior analyst by trade. I don't have a certification now, but I'm by that by trade. Or like other types of supports that are outside of the school environment that help inform the school day being better and therefore seeing strides of improvement or highlights of challenges or supports that are more necessary. What I'm trying to kind of just basically inform the people who are here is that your IEP process is a way to kind of govern that, but it's not going to be the end all be all for that, nor should it be. It should be this cadre of folks that are helping to support what you all want, which is, you know, for your loved one to be you know, as successful as and meet the abilities that they have. And so that's why I had to kind of couch that a little bit, not to say that we shouldn't be pursuing that or that families don't have the right to pursue that, because they do, absolutely. And that's what that's the greatest thing about what the IEP is. But that's another thing that is a huge disconnect once they leave the school system, because that IEP doesn't exist anymore when you turn 18 or 19 or you turn 23. It does not exist anymore, and that mechanism doesn't exist anymore. So kind of getting schooled on that very early on is helpful to be able to navigate when you operate in worlds where that no longer is the kind of the baseline understanding of what kind of the world works.
Thank you so much, Mike. Audrey, did you want to add on?
I did. So I think you're both right. And not that I'm going to be a mediator of any sort. I don't know if I'm going to be stoking the fire here or not, but I agree with both of you 100%, but I just want to make it clear to the families that are here that might not understand this. The school district is responsible for preparing your child for transition, for a transition to adulthood in whatever it's going to be. And once your child ages out, either they earn a diploma and they're 18 or they turn 22 and they're no longer receiving transition services, other agencies become primarily responsible, right? Medical insurance, regional center, DOR, et cetera. During high school, you can have and should have those agencies as part of your IEP meetings and start building those relationships as soon as possible, because in adulthood, it's very siloed. The parent is the case manager, nobody else. There's no IEP director. And we think it's hard in high school. It's much more siloed in adulthood. And there's a lot less in my experience. And Mike, I love to hear, I wanted my son to work with you, hearing from you, because it sounds like you are doing a lot more of a collaborative approach. And then Della, you talked about person-centered needs. Not everybody in the world has that approach, unfortunately. Like, they get to adulthood and it can be, well, this is how we do things here. And it is not person-centered and it's very siloed and people aren't talking to each other. So I agree with you, Mike, that we need to start that conversation early. So if parents know who are all the adult agencies who are going to be working with this child once they age out of high school, but you also need to hold the school district responsible for providing the services that they're obligated to provide under IDEA, a federal law that says that students need to be assessed appropriately at transition, always, but definitely at transition age, and that they have to have measurable post-secondary goals and annual goals tied to those post-secondary goals and the services to ensure that they make progress. So I sometimes feel like the question was about the school district saying, we already do this, we don't need to write a goal for your child. And I'm going to go back and say it should be individualized. And if the child has that need, and at the end of the day, let's say you have a relationship with DOR or Ala Costa or any other agency and they drop the ball, the school district is responsible at the end of the day for making sure that the students' needs are met until they age out of the school system. So I don't want it to be a battle, but parents need to know where the responsibility lies, because there's a lot of finger pointing and a lot of like, well, they should be doing it and they should be doing it. If your kid is still in high school and has not earned a diploma, at the end of the day, the school district is responsible for making sure there are goals and services and progress. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Audrey. I appreciate it. I am going to jump to the next question. So I'm not sure that we have any special education administrators from our 5 districts SELPA present, but I'm going to ask this question anyway. This question was for any or all of them. I'd like to know what you tell your staff constitutes an appropriate transition assessment. What areas should be assessed? What type of assessment measure should be used, etc. So if the panelists have ideas and want to weigh in on that question, we'd love to hear it. Anyone from DRR want to tackle that one?
I'm sorry. I thought we were on question number 8, but anyway, I just lost my thing of thought just now. I'm sorry. What was the question again?
Sure. And I'm going out of order because we're running short on time. So I'm
Okay,
just trying to
that's
put the
fine.
questions. Yeah.
Okay.
The question is, what should districts tell their staff that constitutes an appropriate transition assessment? What areas should be assessed and what types of assessment measures should be used, etc. Jan, you have some ideas there?
Yeah, so there, again, it depends on the person and it depends on, whether they're high support or lower support needs. We actually do independent educational evaluations around transition. We've been busy the last couple of years, as Shari can attest. We do them primarily because school districts have not done an adequate job. They haven't used formal tests of any sort. They haven't checked any soft skills. They're not asking the kids, what is it you want to do? How are you going to get there? I mean, really is just very loosey-goosey. It's what I call checkbox transition planning, where the school districts just say, okay, I talked to him twice this year about what he wants to do later on. And he says he wants to go work at Starbucks, even though he has an auditory processing delay, right? So we see those transition plans throughout the state. This is not just the Bay Area. This is not just any one area. But I've seen, a kid who basically was functionally at grade 2 in mathematics, and his transition plan literally said that he wanted to go to UC Berkeley and study physics. And I mean, it just makes you kind of want to pull your hair out, because nobody is talking to these children about what's possible, what's reasonable. Not to say that over, 15 years of remediation, he couldn't do it, but that wasn't going to happen right after high school. The kid did not have the skill set. So what I like to see is, we use a version of the strong interest inventory, the Myers-Briggs, good old-fashioned career counseling. That's what my master's is in. I want kids to really understand the pros and cons of different careers, and it doesn't matter, what they want to do, but some kind of goal, either that they you know, we had one kid who really liked cars. We got him washing Teslas. That was his fabulous thing. He was so happy to be washing Teslas. But it has to be person-centered. It has to be realistic. It has to have some kind of way or path that the kid can get there, right? It can't be some lofty goal. And what it should never be is, again, that checkbox. Kid will go to, you know, student will go to college, student will live at home, student will move out. And I see those time and time again, and they just make me want to pull my hair off. So ask them specifically, what tests are you using? They should be doing it at 16, and they should be doing it again in the last year. And they should be having those conversations each and every year, asking the kid, what's different this year? What are you still interested in animatronics, or what else are we interested in? Really do actual assessment.
Thank you, Jan. Cheryl, did you want to weigh in? Still with us, Cheryl?
There we go. Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. Just very quickly, I think that my answer to that question when I'm talking to families is that an adequate transition evaluation is enough in-depth, multiple types of evaluations, observations, data, and so on, that you can develop a meaningful transition plan. And so it is, I'll tell you what it's not a career inventory, and it's not going to the California Employment Development Department and filling out their survey, although those things can both be a starting place or helpful. It is thinking about, as everyone said, who is this individual student? How do we get them where they want to go? That's why transition planning starts with the post-secondary goals and goes backwards. And then my final comment is, so often teachers have so much information to share about this piece. They know the student, they've worked with the student, especially special educators, and yet I rarely hear them really advocating for their students. I think part of it's just the time in the IEP meeting or whatever, but that's something we can do a better job with, is making sure we get input from everybody who knows the student, and especially the student. Thanks.
Thank you, Cheryl. Mike, did you want to add on?
I did, thank you. And I appreciate Cheryl's last comment, which I think is most pertinent, which is, what does the student want? What do they want with their life? If we're going to be person-centered, we need to get their input more first and foremost. I also wanted to give a hat tip to my colleague, Audrey, who I don't know personally, but I read her treatise that she put in the chat related to transition, which I think is super helpful for folks to look at. So please take a look at that. I've read it before this meeting, but I think, I'll defer to Jan and Audrey, who work at a broader base than I do, although I've certainly done transition-based work in multiple states, and certainly here in the East Bay, in Alameda County. In my personal professional opinion, there isn't an assessment tool that's adequate all by itself. You're going to need to have a ton of different information to help make a determination about what's best. And again, looking at it through a person-centered lens, what's appropriate for somebody is different than what's appropriate with somebody, right? Like, you know, for and from somebody are different things. And so, you know, that helps tease what, you know, progressive day programs are doing in terms of like, or, you know, vocational development programs are doing in terms of discovery, to help kind of craft a direction for a person to be able to have gainful employment long term. And, you know, there's a cadre of different assessments that are out there that I think have some statistical and professional validity, but don't operate independent of each other. And so the comment that the parent that I know, Kathleen, on the call, which is a conversation with somebody, is not an assessment for anything. It's a snapshot in time for your son's kind of representation of how they are versus of like what their abilities are and their needs are, right? And so that, and again, to be clear, because I don't think there's any one thing that's out there, there's a number of things that can be helpful to help govern that. But to what Janet said earlier and what Cheryl had underscored, That's part of the reason why I think transition is the most overlooked and probably the least appreciated period of time for people in the special education world. You know, and you should be starting with this stuff. I want to be clear about this. For those families who are later in the game, it's not too late. But if you're earlier in the game, talking about this stuff much early on, it allows you to create a path that could go towards DOR-based services or workability within a school district or a variety of different things that can be helpful for them. And that process needs to be initiated, quite frankly, by families because they're the ones who kind of govern that IEP process, you know, early on. So, you know, if you were to, even if you were to hodgepodge all of those different assessment tools that are there, it's only going to give you a kind of half-assed portrait about what someone's ability set is and where they could go. And I want us to be looking at this as a community from a strength-based perspective and what is possible for folks. And if you're looking at it through the lens of possibility, then it becomes what can we do with somebody versus what they're able to do. And I think those two things oftentimes are in conflict. And so while I could prescribe you, or again, refer you to Audrey's really well thought out piece about different options that are there, those are going to be a mosaic about what could be there. But ultimately, as Cheryl pointed out and Jan pointed out, the collection of people that are in their circle of support for those students are going to help create a better, as good a picture that will hopefully align with what those quote unquote assessments put in place. But you know, getting a job is a complex thing for those of us who need to go get work, right? Like you got to do a lot of different things in order to get a job, or a lot of different things to be able to like kind of accommodate yourself in an inclusive world. Some of that stuff is ready-made and some of that is nebulous. So, you know, forgive me for getting my soapbox, but I just wanted to share that.
I appreciate it very much, and it leads to a great segue to the next question. And this one is for DOR. Is DOR able to reach out about internships or summer jobs at any organization a student is interested in, or are these jobs limited to where DOR already has opportunities or relationships?
Can I
Okay.
start? Yeah, and I just want to start and just punctuate just for a minute. We're all over the state, Northern, Central, Southern California. We are everywhere. And by the way, you all, we haven't officially changed our name. So if we still say DOR, we're in good shape because I haven't even got acclimated to our new name yet. But we're going to get there. So no, if you have a student that's interested in something and there's a partnership already there, it makes it great because we have a partnership maybe in Southern California. We reach out and figure out if this person's in Stockton. So now we're going to develop a same relationship with a similar business or same business in Stockton. But I also want to add that if there's a unique and different kind of a service delivery interest or strand that this student may have, we certainly will work to cultivate that. And Anna, that's where I think you can come in and kind of punctuate how we do that in the time that we have.
Sure. I assume that everyone here knows that DOR student services, where we provide pre-employment services to ages 16 to 21 or before they turn 22. And those students that has IEP or 504 or any documented disability, and they have to be, of course, a student. So that means they have to be enrolled in any school program, alternative program, it could be homeschooled or anywhere. But anyway, that's just a very short introduction. But in answer to that question, yes, we do provide yes, we do provide work experience to anyone who's like being referred that are the students that's interested in. But I'm just to give you, in fact, I have some students who actually, it was the parent who reached out to the businesses and then provided the information to me, and I reached out to the business, and then we started the work experience program. So now we have students who are actually working in that business, and there's a lot more. There's a long line of employers that have heard about our program. So now it's like, well, really, you know, it's kind of free labor because we're providing everything for the business. We're providing, there's no liability in the business. We provide the work compensation. We provide all the paperwork. We'll do everything. We do it just like any employer who does all the paperwork, you know, from the I-9, the U4 and all that. DOR takes care of all of that. And then until we onboard them, we have Foundation of California Community College as our employer of record. And we have Workday as our another third party who does our payroll. So I know we don't have much time, but I could talk to you more about work experience, and that's what I've been doing here in the side of Greater Youth Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Annalyn. I want to get to our next question quickly, and this is a question for both Director Babcock and any special education directors that might be with us. In researching transition assessments for my own daughter, I was unable to find anyone local other than Evo Libri that conducts transition assessments. Yet, Evo Libri's fee exceeds the SELPA-approved cost containment cap for a transition assessment by more than $3,000. Since these cost containment numbers are based on local market rate, I would like to know where the SELPA got their transition assessment fee data. I would also like to know if the SELPA or districts plan to raise their cost containment cap in this area to demonstrate their commitment to ensuring students with disabilities can live successful, independent post-secondary lives.
So I will jump in and say, we've heard that cap before, and this is the first time it's been refused. So it's really kind of crazy. Yes, we're expensive, but they also get a 35 to 45 page document complete with, you know, services, everything's outlined in the document. It takes about a month for us to develop one. So Oakland has paid for this, and Oakland's been in a world of hurt. Several places, several school districts in the East Bay that are technically under the same SELPA, as far as I understand, have paid for this. So, you know, I don't know what to tell you. It sounds to me like it's more about them just not wanting to make an exception, because as far as I know, they don't do a market evaluation. There are only 3 agencies that I'm aware of in the state of California that does IEEs that are California non-public agencies. We're one of them. And the other 2, I believe, are in Southern California. And as far as I checked their prices a bit ago, we're in line with them. So I'm not quite sure why SELPA is fighting this, frankly. And if you would like to give them my phone number and my email, you are welcome to do so. And I will give them a list of each and every school district we have done an IEE for in the state of California.
Thank you, Jan. Anyone else want to weigh in on that? Okay, I think we're just about at time.
Wait, Caroline?
Yes.
Wait, I actually would love Katie Babcock to answer that question if she can, because I think it was actually directed at her, wasn't it?
It
Yes.
was.
Yes, it was. So
Thank you, Katie.
the market rate, we go by the rates need to be comparable to district employees or local contractors. And it's really true that there are very few contractors that do this work, to Jan's point. And so it's very tough to get a market rate. Many SELPAs do not even list transition IEEs in their policy, or they list it without a rate. And what we did was take the highest total compensation of district employees that are licensed to do the transition assessment, which is education specialists that are licensed to do that, and averaged the highest across the SELPA and estimated about 10 hours to do the work.
That's the problem, Katie. It's not 10 hours.
Is it perfect? No, but that's what it's based on. And the second part of the question is, are we going to raise the rates? We are going to revisit the rates. And I guess I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Katie, for tackling that question. We are just about at time. I want to thank our panelists so very much for coming back to answer questions about post-secondary transition planning. The chat was super active. I really appreciate you all not only engaging with the chat, but engaging live. It became a little bit difficult to grab the questions from the chat after a while. But what I will try to do is pull the really helpful resources and answers to the questions that I see in the chat and create a document that we can post online along with this recording. I'll clean it up so it's just the questions and answers, so there will be no identifying information. So don't worry, it's not going to be so-and-so asked this question. It's just going to be the questions and answers and resources that were provided in the chat, just to make sure that's available to everyone. So again, thank you so very much. I apologize if you asked a question and I didn't get to it. We always run into not having enough time for all of the questions, but this was such a robust and really, really helpful conversation. So thank you so much. Anyone else want to have a last word or anything you want to leave our audience with? If not, then I will wish you all a very, very good evening and express my gratitude one more time. Thank you so much for being available today to answer questions from our audience. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for joining us.